2 Premierships. Wiped from history. Not lost. Erased. In 2010, the Melbourne Storm were the best team rugby league had ever seen. Back-to-back premierships. A roster stacked with the best players in the country. A club that looked untouchable. And then, in April of that year, the game's governing body sat the owners down in a room and told them something that would unmake everything they'd built. Not because of a fight. Not because of a doping scandal. Because of a spreadsheet. For 5 years, the Storm had been paying its players more than the rules allowed. Millions of dollars, hidden outside the salary cap, in deals no other club knew existed. And when it came out, the punishment wasn't a fine. It wasn't a suspension. It was erasure. Every point deleted. Every premiership stripped. As if the seasons had never happened at all. But here's what almost nobody talks about. The players didn't know. The fans didn't know. And 5 years later, when the dust settled, the money was gone, the trophies were gone, but the club was still standing. So who actually paid the price for what happened in that room? Because by the end of this story, you'll see that the punishment didn't touch the people who built the system. It landed entirely on the players who never saw a cent of it, and on a fan base that spent a decade defending a team the record books say never won anything. To understand how this happened, you have to understand what Melbourne Rugby League was before 2010. The Storm entered the NRL in 1998, an expansion club in a city where rugby league had almost no history. AFL owned Melbourne. Rugby league was an import, an experiment, a club with no fans and no roots. By 2007, that experiment had become a machine. Craig Bellamy, a coach obsessed with structure and defense, had built a roster that played a version of the game no one else could keep up with. Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk. Names that would go on to be considered among the greatest to ever play the sport. They won the 2007 Premiership. They made the 2008 and 2009 Grand Finals. On the field, Melbourne looked like a club that had cracked the code, that had found a system so efficient it could compete with clubs twice its size and 3 times its history. What nobody outside a small circle knew was that the system wasn't just tactical. It was financial. And it was about to catch up with all of them. On April 22, 2010, News Limited, the Storm's owner, called an emergency press conference. What they announced stunned the league. An internal investigation, they said, had uncovered a second set of books. For 5 years, the Storm had been paying players through side deals structured to sit outside the salary cap, the mechanism that was supposed to keep every club competing on equal financial footing. The numbers were staggering. Reports at the time estimated the club had exceeded the cap by more than $1 million a year, some years by significantly more. Contracts drawn up outside the official system. Payments that never appeared on the books the league was allowed to see. The NRL's response was immediate and, by rugby league standards, unprecedented. Both 2007 and 2009 premierships stripped. The 2008 and 2009 minor premierships stripped. Every competition point scored in the 2010 season deducted, meaning the team could not qualify for the finals no matter how they performed. A $500,000 fine. For a moment, it looked like justice. A powerful club had cheated, and the cheating had been punished at the harshest possible level. But punishing the club and punishing the people who built the fraud turned out to be 2 very different things, and only one of them actually happened. Here's the detail that gets lost in every retelling of this story. The players say they had no idea. Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk, the faces of the dynasty, were adamant in the aftermath that they were simply paid what they were told they'd earned. They didn't structure the contracts. They didn't hide the numbers from the league. They played every game, every final series, every grand final, believing they were part of a legitimate premiership win. And then, within days, they were told none of it counted. Imagine training for a decade to become the best player in the world at what you do. Imagine winning the sport's ultimate prize, twice, surrounded by teammates who became lifelong friends, in front of a crowd that had learned to love a game it wasn't supposed to care about in that city. And then imagine being told, by a phone call, that officially, it never happened. The players kept their premiership rings. The league let them keep the personal medals and awards. But the team's premierships were gone from the record books entirely. 2010 will forever show that Melbourne Storm won 0 points that year, and 2007 and 2009 show no premiers at all. The men who did the work were never charged with anything. And yet they were the ones who had to walk out onto the field every week that season, knowing that no matter what they did, it wouldn't count. This is where the story becomes almost unbearable to watch, if you go back and look at it. The Storm were not kicked out of the competition. They were told to keep playing, every week, every match, in front of crowds who now knew the club had cheated, but stripped of the ability to win anything. No points. No finals. No possible premiership. And they kept winning anyway. Game after game, Melbourne beat opponents who had everything to play for, while playing for nothing themselves. It was, by any measure, one of the strangest sporting spectacles in Australian history. A team performing at a championship level in a season that had already been decided to mean nothing, for them, before it even continued. Some saw it as proof the team really was that good, cap or no cap. Others saw something closer to punishment theatre, a public, weekly reminder to the players of exactly what had been taken from them, stretched out over months instead of delivered all at once. Either way, by the end of that season, the questions had only multiplied. If the club could still field this team and still dominate the competition, what did the punishment actually accomplish? And if the players were innocent, why were they the ones serving the sentence? Look at what happened to the people actually responsible, and the picture gets harder to justify. The club's football operations manager and chief executive at the time resigned in the wake of the scandal. But the ownership group, News Limited, one of the most powerful media companies in the country, kept the license. The club was never shut down. It was never relegated. It continued to exist, continued to be funded, continued to recruit. Within a few years, the roster that had supposedly been cheating continued to be one of the most dominant in the competition, this time, by all accounts, within the rules. Which raises an uncomfortable question the league has never fully answered. If the talent and the system were good enough to keep winning without the hidden payments, what exactly was bought with the money that got hidden in the first place? The Premierships have never been reinstated. To this day, if you look up the NRL Premiership roll, 2007 and 2009 show no official Premier. The seasons happened. The games were played. The crowds were there. But according to the record, they weren't. So here's where this leaves us. A club broke the rules for 5 years, and the punishment fell heaviest on the players who never saw the money and were never found to have known about it. The executives who built the system left the game. The company that owned the license kept it. And the trophies, the actual, physical proof that any of it happened, remain in a strange kind of limbo. Real enough to hold. Erased enough to not officially exist. Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, and Cooper Cronk went on to become 3 of the most decorated players in the history of the sport, with premierships they won later in their careers fully recognised. But 2007 and 2009 sit there in their record, the 2 that everyone in the league knows they won, and no record book will ever say they did. Which leaves the real question rugby league has never had to answer out loud. When you take the trophy away from a team but leave every player who won it walking around, still knowing exactly what happened in that dressing room, did you actually erase the dynasty? Or did you just take away the only part of it that was ever paperwork?